It was 36 nautical miles off Abu Dhabi. A bulk carrier was transiting, what should have been a routine commercial passage. Then the crew heard a sound they would describe later as a nearby splash, followed by an explosion. By the time the report reached US military intelligence, the picture was becoming clear. Iran had begun planting naval mines in the Strait of Hormuz. Not as a threat, not as a warning, as an act of war. Within hours, the most important 21 miles of ocean on the planet had become a killing ground. March 10, 2026, the Gulf of Oman, 36 nautical miles southwest of Abu Dhabi. The bridge crew of a commercial bulk carrier reported what they initially thought was a mechanical failure. Then came the sound. A splash nearby, followed almost immediately by an explosion. The vessel shuddered. Damage. Reports began flowing to the captain. The crew did not know what had hit them. US military intelligence did. Within hours, signals coming out of the Persian Gulf confirmed what analysts had feared since the airstrikes of February 28th. Iran had begun mining the Strait of Hormuz. Not in the abstract sense that military planners had wargamed for decades. In the operational, physical, irreversible sense, actual mines, in the water, on active commercial shipping routes. The most important 21 miles of ocean on the planet had just become a minefield. And the world had approximately zero operational answers for what happened next. To understand the scale of what Iran had just done, you need to hold a single number in your mind. 25%. That is the share of all seaborne oil trade that passes through the Strait of Hormuz in a normal year. Add liquefied natural gas and the figure expands. 20% of all LNG traded globally transits this corridor. The combined energy value moving through this strait on any given day runs into the billions. The nations dependent on it include Japan, South Korea, India, China, and every economy in Western Europe. That relies on Gulf crude. The strait itself is almost absurdly narrow. At its tightest point, the navigable shipping channel is just 21 miles wide. Inbound and outbound lanes are each 2 miles across, separated by a 2-mile median. A vessel transiting at standard speed spends less than 90 minutes in the critical zone, but 90 minutes is more than enough time for a mine to do its work. For decades, the Strait of Hormuz existed in the threat category, but never in the confirmed crisis category. Iran had always stopped short. The 1980s tanker war produced some mining incidents, but nothing that closed the strait entirely. The threat was a pressure tool, a negotiating lever, a line Iran kept pointing at but never fully crossed. On February 28, 2026, they crossed it. The moment the United States and Israel launched Operation Epic Fury, coordinated strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities, military infrastructure, and command centers, Iran made a calculation. If their country was being struck from the air, they would strike back through the sea. And they had a weapon perfectly designed for the purpose. Naval mines are among the oldest weapons in modern warfare and among the most persistent threats in contemporary maritime operations. They are cheap. A basic contact or influence mine can be manufactured for a few $1,000s. They are durable. They can sit on the ocean floor for months or years, waiting. They are strategically efficient. A single mine does not need to sink a ship to achieve its objective. It only needs to make the risk of transiting a corridor unacceptable to commercial shipping insurers. Once premiums become prohibitive, vessels stop coming. The blockade enforces itself. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy had been preparing for this contingency for years. Their doctrine, drawn from the lessons of the tanker war and refined over 3 decades of asymmetric naval planning, treats the Strait of Hormuz as a pressure valve. The Irq Navy maintains A fleet of fast attack craft, midget submarines, and mine-laying vessels, capable of seeding the shipping lanes rapidly and with minimal warning. What changed in March 2026 was that they actually used it. US military sources reported that Iran had begun mining operations in the Strait. In response, President Trump issued a direct demand: Iran must remove any mines it had planted immediately. The US military said it had already destroyed 16 Iranian Minelayer vessels, small Irq Navy craft, caught in the act of laying ordnance. 16 Minelayers. That tells you how many were operating simultaneously. The Irq had not sent one boat to seed one lane. They had deployed a coordinated fleet, a systematic mining operation designed to cover multiple transit routes at once, to make sweeping impossible without significant time and specialized assets, and to impose a cost on any vessel willing to attempt the passage. The shipping intelligence picture on March 11, 2026, reads like a damage report from a naval engagement, not a commercial shipping log. At least 3 vessels sustained damage in a single 24-hour period. The Mayari Nari, a Thailand-flagged bulk carrier, caught fire. 20 crew members were rescued by the Royal Navy of Oman. 3 others were reported missing. At almost the same time, 2 oil tankers were struck by an Iranian drone boat in the waters off Basra, Iraq. Both caught fire. At least 1 crew member was killed. Also on that day, the Irq reported that it had seized 2 foreign oil tankers near Farsi Island in the Persian Gulf. The vessels were transferred to the port of Bushehr. The escalation ladder had been climbed in a single day. The shipping industry did not wait for clarity. Within 24 hours of the March 11 incidents, major global shipping firms suspended operations through the Strait of Hormuz. Their insurers had already moved. War risk premiums for a single transit had gone from 0.125% of vessel value to between 0.2 and 0.4%. For a very large crude carrier, an oil supertanker, that increase represents $250,000 per passage. The economics of passage had become the economics of war. The United States did not have a clean military answer to mine warfare in a contested strait. This is one of the most uncomfortable truths in modern naval doctrine. The US Navy maintains mine countermeasures vessels, specialized ships, designed to detect, classify, and neutralize naval mines. But mine clearance is slow. It is meticulous. In a corridor like the Strait of Hormuz, where mines can be seeded faster than they can be swept, where the seafloor topography complicates sonar detection, and where an adversary can simply lay more mines as fast as you remove them, the calculus is deeply unfavorable. The immediate US response was kinetic. Destroy the Minelayers before they could deploy additional ordnance. The destruction of 16 URGC Navy Minelaying vessels removed a significant portion of Iran's active deployment capability, but the mines already in the water remained. President Trump made an appeal that revealed exactly how constrained American options were. He asked the United Kingdom, France, Japan, South Korea, and China, Iran's strategic partner, to send minesweepers and naval forces to help reopen the corridor. When allies hesitated, the request became a warning. NATO would face consequences for non-cooperation. The US president was asking for minesweepers. That tells you everything about the nature of this weapon. Australia explicitly said it would not send ships. Japan's prime minister ruled out a Japanese naval deployment. The EU explored expanding its existing missions, but individual member states declined one by one. Germany, Italy, the UK, Spain, Romania, Luxembourg. France said any escort mission would only happen after the war ended. The world's most powerful military alliance was paralyzed in front of a weapon that Iran had purchased for thousands of dollars per unit. The narrow margin in the Hormuz crisis was not a moment. It was a pattern. The Irghiz escalation doctrine followed a precise logic: match every Western action on the escalation ladder with an Iranian response, calibrated to the same rung. When Israel struck Iranian natural gas infrastructure, Iran struck Qatar's Ras Laffan Ling plant, same category, roughly equivalent value. When the US destroyed Minelayer vessels, Iran intensified attacks on tankers. But there was a threshold that, if crossed, would have transformed a regional crisis into something categorically different. American military planners had assessed that Iranian forces retained the capability to activate proxy forces in Lebanon, Iraq, and Yemen at a level far beyond their current posture. The Houthi movement in Yemen, which had suspended Red Sea attacks following a ceasefire, was signaling readiness to restart. Hezbollah retained approximately 1,000 drones and 25,000 missiles according to Israeli military estimates. The turning point was not a single strike. It was the strategic decision, made in Tehran, in Washington, and in Tel Aviv, to hold each escalation just below the level that would trigger the next one. Iran kept mining. The US kept destroying mine layers. The ships kept burning. And the strait stayed closed. By late March 2026, the Congressional Research Service documented more than 21 confirmed Iranian attacks on merchant vessels in the Strait of Hormuz. The UN Security Council convened to address the crisis. Bahrain brought a proposal calling on states to ensure the safety of navigation in the strait. Russia and China vetoed it on April 7th. They stated it was biased against Iran and sent the wrong message. The International Energy Agency's March 2026 oil market report documented the full impact on global energy markets. The Economist declared that even the best-case scenario for energy markets was disastrous. 45 million additional people were assessed at risk of acute hunger as a result of the supply chain disruption. On March 20, the United States issued General License U, an executive authorization for otherwise sanctionable transactions related to Iranian crude oil exports. The irony was stark. To manage the supply shock created by closing the strait, Washington had to partially ease the very oil sanctions that had been one of the central grievances driving the conflict. Throughout this period, shipping traffic through the Strait of Hormuz remained largely blocked. What had been a corridor carrying roughly 20 million barrels of oil per day was operating at a fraction of capacity. The canal did not reopen quickly. The economics did not recover quickly. What the Strait of Hormuz crisis of 2026 demonstrated, with devastating clarity, is the asymmetric power of simple weapons against complex systems. The United States Navy is the most sophisticated maritime force in human history. Its carrier strike groups, guided missile destroyers, and attack submarines represent decades of technological investment and operational doctrine refinement against Iran's conventional military in open ocean combat. The outcome of any engagement would not be in doubt. But Iran did not fight in open ocean. Iran fought in a bottleneck. A naval mine has no guidance system. It cannot be jammed. It cannot be deceived by electronic countermeasures. It does not care about stealth, aircraft, or carrier air wings. It sits on the bottom of a shipping lane and waits. And in the specific geography of the Strait of Hormuz, narrow, heavily trafficked, with complex seafloor topography that complicates sonar, mines become a weapon that can neutralize the most expensive military force on the planet at the cost of a few $1 million in ordnance. The crisis also exposed a structural weakness in Western alliance coordination, the reluctance of NATO members and Pacific allies to commit. Minesweepers revealed a gap in collective defense architecture. The US had invested in power projection. The alliance had not invested in mine clearance. When the scenario that called for mine clearance arrived, the response was improvised, slow, and incomplete. There is a deeper lesson about deterrence here. Iran understood that. Closing the strait would impose costs on China, its primary oil customer and strategic partner. Beijing's decision to veto the UN resolution rather than pressure Tehran to reopen the lane revealed something important. In a strategic competition with the United States, China's interest in complicating American power projection outweighed its immediate economic interest in open shipping lanes. Russia's veto carried the same logic. The strait did not close because Iran was militarily superior to the United States. It closed because the specific weapon Iran chose, naval mines in a geographic bottleneck, was one for which the response options of the world's most powerful navy were slow, constrained, and diplomatically complicated. The lesson will not be forgotten. Not by Iran, not by China, not by anyone watching. The Strait of Hormuz crisis of 2026 did not end with a decisive naval battle. There was no moment of triumphant American firepower that reopened the lanes and restored order. The crisis ground forward, tanker by tanker, veto by veto, sanction waiver by sanction waiver, until the political conditions for a ceasefire eventually emerged. But the image that will last from this period is simpler and more disturbing than any of those diplomatic details. It is the image of the Minelayers Nari burning 36 nautical miles from Abu Dhabi. 20 crew members in the water, 3 missing. A hull on fire in a strait that the entire global economy depends on in a year, when the most powerful military alliance in history could not, in real time, make it safe to transit. The Strait of Hormuz is 21 miles wide at its narrowest point. The global economy passes through 21 miles of water. Iran understood that geography better than anyone. And when the moment came, they used it.